am here with Angela Skurtu, and she is going to share with us what she does and just to give us a brief, like, who are you? What do you do? Why do you do what you do?
Okay. Well, I'm Angela Skurtu. I'm a couples and a sex therapist. Um, that's what I do. The therapy, I mean, all kinds of things. So the way I try to break it down is anything a couple fights about, that's what I work with. And I have to be pretty decent at all of those
Sure.
things. And I've been doing it for 15 years. Why I do it is I love walking couples through their problems and helping them create success stories. I love helping them find their joy in life. And I think, a lot of us have lost our way in joy. And so it's a really wonderful experience to like just tangible steps, tips, little things here or there that just make life easier, more manageable.
Hmm.
And of course, as a sex therapist, more sexable, you know, because sex
Yeah.
therapy is life therapy.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. I know I'm kind of just diving in. This is just
Go
who I
for
am. I
it.
just dive into it. So a lot of people would say like, have you found that a lot of people don't like to talk about the intimacy part of their marriage, the sex part of their marriage?
I mean, some people have real life anxiety around it.
Hmm.
And so, yes, I would say, just like any anxious topic, you have two ways you manage anxiety, or poorly, I should say, poorly manage anxiety. You avoid it or over control it,
Yeah.
right? And so, people who have anxiety around sex are either doing one of those two. So, the people who are avoidants will avoid talking about sex, like, as soon as sex is in the room, they're like, "Oh my God, sex is in the room! Don't look." And I mean, like even on a show, like there's some
Right.
people who they just ignore it or they pretend it's not happening, or the over control, the micromanage. Like I'm gonna control every aspect of it. And again, these aren't like great ways to manage anxiety.
Mm-mm.
They're what we do to cope with anxiety when we
Yeah.
don't have decent management systems.
Yeah. Wow, that's really good. So, okay. So, did you say the why you do what you do?
Because I love helping couples walk towards joy and success in their relationships. And honestly, I don't know. So sex is just such a taboo topic for people. And so it's just like it takes a certain kind of person to be able to talk very candidly and directly about sex. And I'm
Mhm.
that unfiltered person. I can,
Yeah.
ask about a blowjob and have no problem going into like the techniques, the detail, like what are you doing? And like oh, that's why you don't like that. Let's cover this.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I mean, like people don't realize how much things that they experience in their life affect how they see certain things.
Mhm.
And especially when it comes to sex, like whether you grew up in a home that was had, I'll just share this really quickly with you. Like for me, we grew up in a home where we had a family member who had a sex addiction of sorts. And so my mom went like far into the spectrum, like, hey, you guys can't watch these types of shows, you can't do this, you can't do that, like it just went to the really like
That's that
way
over
far in.
control.
Yes, yes. So like when you were saying that, I was like, duh. So yeah, that is really crazy.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. So, like, it's usually those things that we're raised with that impact our ability to connect with sex in a healthy way, right?
Yeah.
So, like, values you were taught, anxiety that you were modeled, as you
Hmm.
just
Yep.
described, and just basically not having a healthy relationship with sex.
Yeah. So how else do you, besides sex, like what's the other things that you see typically come up with your clients, like in terms of the therapy side of things?
Well, I would say a common one is infidelity, and I do have a book on infidelity. Um, what's interesting is if I'm doing sex therapy, usually people have come in before breaking a relationship and they want to just improve their relationship and see if
Mhm.
they can create a little spark. But, we're still Americans, so we wait till things are broken, like
Yeah.
really bad before we actually get help. So the
Right.
other side of my practice is after people have just completely destroyed it after an affair and they need help not only repairing the original relationship, but now repairing hurt trust and broken trust.
Yeah. So tell us about your background a little bit. Are you like I know we had this conversation and I'm totally blanking right now, but like you're certified, you got degrees, like what I know you told me and I'm so sorry I forgot.
Well, the audience doesn't know anyways,
That's
right? So,
true.
so I got my bachelor's in Hawaii, my master's in Oregon, and then after that, there's a whole process to licensure and certification. So I'm licensed in the state of Missouri as a couples and a marriage therapist, and then on top of that, I got a certification as a sex therapist, which is another 2-year process. So they're each like different. They're not a master's degree, but the time required is like another master's degree.
Yeah. Wow, that's really awesome. I didn't even know they had that. Like that's the certification part. Obviously, your bachelor's degree, master. I knew those, but I didn't even know they had that kind of thing. That's pretty awesome. And I love that you're helping couples uh really understand all the intricacies of that and how different things affect it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's funny. I was just at a supervision call because I'm also a supervisor for other sex therapists, the new and budding, up and coming sex therapists,
Right?
right? And one of my supervisees said to me, she was like, it's surprising to me how little I actually talk about sex sometimes. Because you got to think about it, right? Like, if you're fighting about your kids, for example, right before you're trying to have sex, that's going to impact your mood.
Hmm.
Like, am I feeling it tonight? No, I can't stand that you yelled at our kids. Like, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Or like if financially, so I'm on different podcasts, and one that's coming up is a financial podcast of like what is the intersection of sex and finance? Well, think of it like if we can't afford a babysitter, if we can't afford to go on a date night, or if we don't know, like, and to be fair, you don't have to have money to have sex. You just have to have creativity. So like I've been poor and you just have free dates, like you
Yeah.
find ways to do dates that are less costly. But like if you don't have those strategies or ways to step away and have some privacy, and you don't at least have a working house that can function, then those things, that stress impacts sex. Sex
Yeah.
ultimately is something about relaxation, like you have to feel relaxed to be sexual. And so if you are in high stress constantly, yeah, of course you're not having sex.
Yeah. That's so true. One of the things that my husband and I have a couple of younger couples that we just kind of mentor in a lot of different ways. And, this has come up before. And one of the things that we kind of talking about what you were talking about, like, just like, hey, you know what? This is affecting, like, you guys are fighting about this and it's affecting your intimacy because you're focused on the fight of this and not, hey, this is going to bring us together in some ways, so yeah, I totally get what you're saying, and that's awesome. I love what you're doing, and as much as it is, like you said, a taboo for a lot of people, it's such an important piece of a relationship like that.
Interesting you bring that up. Like, I think even having processes around conflict, right? So like everybody has conflict, but how do you find ways to table that conflict and still spend quality time with each other?
Hmm.
I don't know what's going on with your couples, but I was thinking of what happens with my couples is it's like as soon as a conflict happens, it's like the relationship shuts down. And instead of having a steady connectedness, even when you're
Hmm.
figuring something out, it's like there's on and off. So
Yeah.
when we're good, but when we're bad, we're really bad. And that's a very unhealthy dynamic in a
Hmm.
relationship to feel like you're either good or bad. There's no in between. Like, I think a lot of the work I'm doing is helping couples with that in between space. What about you, though? I'm curious what you see.
It's so funny to me. People are, the background that I had, I was in ministry for 23 years. And so you see all kinds of different things, and people share, they're just very open. They just share because I was a pastor and they just shared everything. And sometimes I was just like, whoa, that's a lot.
More than you were prepared for. You didn't know you're going to be a
Right.
counselor.
Right. But one of the things that I see is like you talked about finances. Like I see that finances have such a stress on people that it affects everything else in their relationship. And it's not always finances, kids. I mean, like my husband and I have gone through times where we just could not come together and agree on some parental things with our kids. And we were just like, okay, we're going to take a step back because we're just getting so frustrated and stressed towards each other that we got to take a step back. Remember, the main thing is us together, you know. I don't know. Those are things that I've seen. Those are two big things. And then obviously sex is the third one. Um,
Absolutely. It's so difficult too because like they all bleed into each other, right? If you're not on the same page with your kids and you go to bed just thinking, "Oh, I'm just so mad at you for how you handled that situation." I know going to bed is when people are having sex, right? Like it's that process
yeah.
after you've got your kids to bed, but if you don't even have a routine you agree upon for how to put those kids to bed and to help them be in their own space, or even that, like that one's one that's come up too, where a couple is disagreeing on whether they should have their own bed or not, or whether they should share their bed with their kids. And if you have that debate with somebody, wherever they land on it, they will be very intense
Hmm.
about where they stand and
Yes.
why. I've never known somebody who like handled that one without some heat.
Yeah. So what do you say to the person that like husband's on one end, wife's on the other end of the spectrum? And like, what's the one piece of advice that you would say to them to get them to, or the couple or partners, whatever you want to call them, but how do you get them to come back together?
Oh, that's my job every day.
What I mean, like, you do a lot, you do this a lot with couples, and like,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's like a something that sometimes like either a exercise that you use, like, or something like that. Like, tell us, like, give us one example.
Well, so I was thinking of parenting, right? So there's do we discipline or do we positively reinforce? Like do we encourage, right? Like that's a common one where like one person's like, we need to be harder on them. And it's like, no, you're
Mhm.
being too hard on them. We need to like give them skills to get there, like,
Yeah.
and one of the things that I'll explain to people in that particular crisis is that there's value to both ways of being. And so it's not about one or the other. It's how can we use them in a complementary style? And can you at least come together around things like your values, like values you want to be teaching your kiddos as
Mhm.
you're figuring out, do we go discipline or do we go more teaching of skills? So one thing I find with in the parenting realm is there are similar values, and a lot of times people are just approaching the situation
Mhm.
differently. And so if I can start getting them to clarify the deeper meanings behind what they're doing. So like somebody who's maybe disciplining, maybe their value that they're trying to teach is honesty at that time, whereas the other person is teaching responsibility. So even getting them to understand like this is what's happening when this person's doing this or this. Why I go into those deeper values is I'm trying to teach them how to trust each other a little better as they're taking steps with their kids. Because again, it's not that there's one magical parenting bullet that's going to raise your kids into success and adulthood. There just there just isn't. Like
Mhm.
aside from don't abuse your kids, please don't do that and don't neglect them. It's really open, wide, and expanse. There are some things, like some research that suggests absolutely more positive reinforcement than the other stuff, but the reality is we don't live in a world where we're constantly given praise and encouragement all the time. Sometimes you have a
Yeah.
boss who's going to be hard on you. And so, even teaching them that like it's okay to expose your kids to different things in childhood, that this stuff will teach them later on how to handle those situations as adults. Wouldn't you rather them have these experiences with you as parents where it's like less risk, less intense than
Hmm.
later on? And so sometimes the advice I give is give each other a space to try your thing, but then talk about it later at night and like, okay, what worked, what didn't? What are some of the things we like about what happened? What are some things we would adjust? And so like, as long, like I said, as long as there's no abuse or neglect, support what a partner is doing in that moment and then have regular conversations about ways you may want to hone or shape that process.
Yeah.
That's just
Wow.
one.
It's really great advice though. I mean, like, so okay, I have to ask this question. Like, do you ever get the question like it's in a kind of a strange way, but like you're an entrepreneur, like you
Yep.
have your own business, so you are an entrepreneur, but you're also uh it's really about the health, the mental health of couples and those types of things. So tell me why you decided to start your own business with it, and what kind of responses do you get from people when you tell them what you do? I'm totally curious.
two questions. Let me make sure I answer both of them. Um, I knew I wanted to start a business from the get-go. Like I knew I wanted to be in private practice. I did not know what that was going to involve. Like this funny story, like it's a lot. There are so many hats to wear to owning a business that I was not prepared for.
Mm.
But I knew I wanted a private practice because that's kind of the model I saw. I guess I could go back to even like growing pains. Remember the psychiatrist dad who
Yeah.
had his practice in the house? I was like, that was the model I saw whenever I'd see somebody who was a therapist. So I was like, I definitely want to do that. But of course, they didn't model all the other stuff. So it's interesting. The process of learning, I had to network and get to know a lot of other business owners to learn what other people were doing to start
Hmm.
the business. And that was very unique too, because everybody who I would talk to, like, so when I talked to therapists starting a business, they would often say, well, I had a husband who helped me with this, and I did not have a situation where I had financial support. I was on my own. So they gave me some help, but it was never the full picture. And so then when I talked to other business owners, they could give me some help about like marketing and like strategies, but they couldn't give me help on the clinical side. And so basically I had to piecemeal
Mm.
as many stories and strategies from as many people as possible to start creating my business and to do it
Yeah.
successfully. And then to your second question of like, how do people react? That was a part of the process too. So every time I get to know somebody, I had to watch nonverbal communication. Like, how does this land when I say this? Are they like big eyes and scared to death, or are they like, oh, okay, maybe I can get around that? And so there was this filtering process too to my communication and making, I call it PGing it up. So to
Yeah.
speak. But I had to really pay attention to the words and language
Mm.
in business to see how do I market this? Because sex doesn't sell in a mainstream sort of way. Sex
Yeah.
is something that when people hear it, they're like seedy, naughty, oh, like it's kind of fantastical in some ways, like that it gets people drawn in, but like, oh, I wouldn't do that. Oh, there's
Yeah.
you have to dance a fine line of putting it out there, but also being thoughtful about how it shows up. So that's been a dance, I'll say.
I'm sure. I'm sure. I have to tell this story, and I shared this with you when we met. I was at a networking event, and I was getting ready to leave, and one of the individuals that I network with, they're like, "Hey, where are you going?" I said, "Oh, well, I have a potential guest for my podcast that I'm going to go to meet," and they're like, "Oh, what does she do?" And I was like, "Well, she's a couples and sex therapist," and they were like, "Wow, I probably need that," and they just walked off, and I just laughed. But I mean, I wasn't sure how they were going to react. I didn't really care either, but like it was just so funny because they were just like, "Well, I probably need that," and they just walked off. And how common is that for you?
So there's two responses, and they all have to do with a person's relationship to sex. So I don't take them personally,
Hmm.
but some people lean in like, "Ooh, I want to learn all about that," and the other people, it's avoidance. It's the same thing that happens with anxiety. So the
Yeah,
others will be like, "Oh, not for me, thanks, bye," and they just end the conversation as quick as possible. And
yeah,
so, but I've learned, like I said, I've worked with that for so long. I know what it is. I will say there are certain places that I am thoughtful about how I frame who I am. So, like in very, very conservative spaces, I'll just say I'm a marriage therapist, and then sex will get lightly trickled in very I don't know. I don't necessarily want to say liberal because it's not necessarily the case because there's very open-minded conservatives or liberals, but
yeah,
like in more heathen spaces where people are wild and free and sexual, then I just put it right out there and people are like, "Oh, whatever. I talk about that, blah blah."
yeah. It's so
Um,
funny. That's funny. I mean, it's true though. I mean, if you think about the conversations like you have with people. And like I'm just sitting here thinking about like my siblings, they're all like they all love to joke about sex. They love to make jokes about different things like that. And so it doesn't really affect me as much
mhm.
as some other people do because they just are silly and it's just
Yeah.
all in good fun and type of thing. And I think what you said earlier about having a healthy view of like that side of your relationship, and yeah, it's sad to me, but I understand why some people struggle, especially like with people, and I'm sure you see this, like people that have been abused or in bad relationships, or where it was used more of a tool of punishment or satisfying someone else, and it not being a mutually beneficial type of thing. I'm sure that you see the worst side and the best side of it all.
It's true, I do. I see the whole gamut, and it's painful to see the ways that sex has been used against people too,
Hmm.
right? Like, so there's definitely trauma that I work with clients on, or like body image, like such deep-seated body image issues. And so in some situations, if I can even get sex to a neutral space again, then that is a step in the right
Yeah.
direction. Um, but I love that people are coming to see me and to work with me, because it's an opportunity to change that relationship, because nobody has to stay stuck, right? So like there's a way that even with someone with trauma, they'll think I'm inherently broken or I'll never get better at this. And that's just not true. Like,
Right.
yes, your trauma is a part of you, but it doesn't have to define you.
Hmm.
And that's some of my most powerful work, is helping walk somebody out of that or through that trauma. I can't say out of, like through that trauma, and developing a healing relationship with sex again can be one of some of my most powerful experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I really love what you do. I think it's
Thank
such a
you.
beautiful thing to help people in relationships. I've seen over the years of being in ministry, I've seen relationships just people stay in a relationship and they just hate each other. And it's just, I'm like, how do you live that way? I would not want to go home, you
Well, once
know?
it becomes your normal, it does become what people are used to. So, I mean, like, it's just honestly, that's why people have affairs, right? Is that
Hmm.
it's this is what you know, and so it's too scary to, like, everybody says, if I would never have an affair, I'll just leave. And it's like, no, you don't. You never do. Like, I'm literally everything I do in this work is like proof of like, no, you won't. Stop saying that, because you don't.
Yeah.
Because your whole lives are entwined. It's actually
Hmm.
very hard to uncouple. For anybody who has walked through a divorce, it's a long, slow, arduous process. And so as a result, sometimes people have affairs because it's too hard to face like that process of uncoupling. Because I mean,
Yeah.
you've been married, I'm married now. I actually just got married this weekend.
I know. Congratulations. I didn't want to
Thank
bring it up. I
you.
wanted you to bring
You're
it up. So
okay.
congratulations.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy to be married to a wonderful man. But I have gone through a divorce, and so I can speak to the experience of how challenging and how much time and energy it takes to uncouple and
Hmm.
re-evolve your system, a
Yeah.
situation, and so I can definitely see why, I'm not, so this isn't an excuse. Please don't cheat. I don't encourage it. But it is one of the reasons why, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it's sometimes easier to create a new relationship than to end an old one.
Yeah.
It's terrible, but it's
It's
true.
so true. And my husband and we are celebrating our 20th anniversary tomorrow.
Oh,
And on October
congratulations.
9th, because I don't know exactly what day this is going to air yet. But
Yeah.
one of the things we've been really intentional about for us is we when we got married, there were three things that were non-negotiables for us.
Okay.
Um, and we are a Christian, we're Christians, Christ followers, whatever you want to call it. And God would always be the center of our marriage. So we were going to pray together every night, and we pray together every night. We would never call each other a name. And I've never out of that we joke around. I'm like, you're so dumb, you're being silly, type thing. But we don't like out of anger, we don't say those things. And the last one is we would never disrespect one another. If we're angry, we walk away and then we come back and then we can have the conversation. And I think us having those expectations in the relationship
Mhm.
uh, has been very successful for us. Do we like each other all the time? No. Do I love him with my whole heart? You know what I mean? I don't know. And those are for us, like kind of what you were talking about. Like if you don't have realistic expectations for one another, or like I can tell you when we first got married, like for me, I had dreams every night that he either cheated on me or left me, and that was things that were from my past
Mm,
and just how I grew up. And, it's speaking to everything that you're saying. And it's like, I'm looking at it going, huh, that makes sense.
yeah, absolutely. Well, no, I love those. I love those, like those kind of guidelines or expectations. I do think couples need to have clear expectations. And some of us have to unlearn. I mean, when I look back at my old relationship, this new relationship with my partner, we had to unlearn some very
Mm,
toxic behaviors from our past, unhealthy conflict styles, and that was its own walk. But the truth is, we heal through trauma in relationship, right?
yeah.
Like as we walked together and learned, oh, okay, I don't have to be defensive. We can just talk to each other. I still remember our first conflict. We sat outside in the backyard, and he was tense and I was tense, but we were like, we don't know what a healthy relationship looks like because he had divorced too. We both had come from very, very toxic relationships. I was like, well, I don't either. I'm doing my best. So let's figure it out, and we did, over time, it's funny now I say we have like a quarterly conflict because that's about the frequency of our conflict at this time. But we have grown to unlearn some of those toxic traits from the past. And
Hmm.
now I have trust in my heart that we will walk through those conflicts with respect and kindness. And he also taught me some things. So the marriage therapist who has all the skills, he taught me things about like, we don't have to talk about this right now. And in fact, if we do, we're probably not going to do it great. So let's take a
Mm,
break to be respectful, and then we'll come back in a day or two. But like when we do come back, he comes back with things that he's figured out about himself, and I come back with things I figured out about myself.
yeah.
And so now that we've done that multiple times, I really trust that even though the conflict is happening and we haven't figured it out yet, we will get there. And
Mm,
it's a real like that. Remember earlier we were talking about like that there's no off and on with us
yeah.
anymore. We just, okay, this is tabled. We still love each other. We're still a couple through this conflict. But in a day or two, when we can come back to it, I also trust that we'll figure it out. And that took a lot of unlearning and relearning for us to get there.
Yeah. I love so much of what you're saying. And I really hope that whoever listens to this podcast can actually learn something from what you're sharing and don't be afraid. I guess I just want to say this. Don't be afraid if you're in your marriage and it's just not where you want it to be. Don't be afraid
Mhm.
to reach out. And we're going to talk about contact information at the end, but like don't be afraid to reach out and man, go meet with Angela and like it's not as scary as you think it is. And honestly, like it could be a game changer in the relationship that you're in.
Thank
So
you.
I just
I
want to
would
say that.
really appreciate that, especially if people came before they were ready to divorce. It's like
Yeah,
that is when we can do some serious work to help out. But when people wait till the very end, man, it's painful. It's painful
it
to everyone
is.
involved.
It is, and it's not normally just the two of you in the relationship. It's also your family if you have children. There's a lot of layers to all of it. Okay, so you talked about the clinical side, and then you have a business. Like there's the clinical and the business, and how it's hard. So tell me one thing that you were like, this is was a game changer for me, and this is how I handle it when it comes to meshing the business and the clinical, kind of together.
Yeah, policies and procedures. Having
Yes.
very, yeah, I know this is so exciting, right? But like having clear policies and procedures. So in every business, you have policy manuals and like ways that you follow protocols. But like when you own your own business, you have to figure out what those protocols are. And
Hmm.
so I learned early on that in order to be an effective businesswoman, I need very efficient, very clear policies and procedures that I follow to a T, like religiously.
Yeah.
So, for example, I get all of the business done first. When people first come in, we take care of payment. I introduce the confidentiality concerns and I make sure they understand what the therapy expectations are. So we talk about expectations for marriage.
Yeah.
We got to set some expectations for therapy. So it's business first and then we get to the pleasure. therapy. And I even like, I'm very thoughtful about, when I take payment up front versus at the end. Because think of it, like somebody's just had a big emotional experience. And
Hmm.
do you really want to, like, after a big cry or in the middle of a cry, it's like, all right, so you're ready to pay me now? It's like, no.
Right. Oh man,
So
that's most people wouldn't think about that, but you're right.
there needs to be policies and procedures. Or like I have a cancellation policy. Like effective policies and procedures are there to protect both parties.
Hmm.
And so they're not just to protect you, they're to protect me, but so that we know what the expectations are going forward. So I have a 3-day cancellation policy. As long as people do that, they're good to go, but I still charge if they don't. And there's a
Yeah.
reason for that. It's so that I'm not resentful working with you and like
Yeah.
they just cancel all the time. They cancel last minute. Like, and I had to adjust that. So that's the other thing. So policies can change and evolve,
Yeah.
but you do need to have very clear, effective policies and procedures to run a business successfully.
Oh yeah.
And there's many different ones that I have that I've developed over time. Those are just two I can think of right now that like a client coming in would know. And it's so funny. So when I have a 9-year-old, but I had these so down to a T that whenever I went on maternity leave and my clients would go to I had a colleague who I was referring to, she was like, Angela, your clients are so well trained. They just come in right away and they are ready to do. I'm like, no, this is when you do things efficiently, there's a trust that's built
Hmm.
between both parties of, oh, this is how we handle it. This is the policy. I can trust that this is how things will happen going forward. But when there aren't clear
Yeah.
policies and procedures, then it's easier to break trust. It's easier to create resentment on either side.
Hmm.
So I would say that is like the big, the big answer to that question.
I love that because I work with businesses and all the time I'm asking, like, what expectations did you set and did you communicate them?
Hmm.
And especially with working with other staff or even with their clients. And I'm like, well, did they know that you wanted that? Well, well, no, I didn't tell them. I thought they would understand. And I was like you people need to hear something like what I think it's like 7 times before they actually get it. And so I love that you're with the policies and the procedures, you're creating clear expectations and you're communicating that. And it's a huge win for a business. I love that that's your insight for entrepreneurship.
It is, and I think it's important for people to understand it builds trust. It is a
Yeah.
trust builder to be clear about expectations,
Hmm.
policies, and procedures. It's not, and it's not being mean. So for women listening, women struggle with following through with their boundaries and their expectations because they feel like they're being mean. But if you think about it, if you don't have a clear expectation around like a missed visit fee, for example, then you might reactively respond with I'm gonna just charge you this amount because I'm mad at you, which
Yeah.
breaks trust both ways. It's
Yep.
got to be just business, right? Like, hey, this is
Yeah.
my policy, here's how I handle this. So one way I developed them early on, because again, I'm my own solopreneur, there's not people guiding and shaping this for me, but I would look at anger in myself. Like, am I angry in
Mm.
this situation? And anytime in business I got angry, I would say, all right, Angela, what policy is not represented here that will protect both you and the other party going forward? And I don't think I had these all at once. I have developed them over time. There are times where I used to have a 24-hour policy, but I would get so mad because, again, how do you fill a client the
Hmm.
next day when you only have
Right.
24-hour cancellation? So they were following the policy, but then I was still resentful. And it's
Yeah.
like, now I don't have people here and there's this extra hour. So like I know whether this makes sense for people or not, like pay
Totally
attention to
makes
your
sense.
anger. Like, okay, are you angry about something? Okay, then what policy or procedure is not present that can help prevent this from occurring? Because again, you have to be business and professional. And
Yeah.
if you don't have policies set up to keep you professional in the way you respond to people, that's on you.
Yep, 100%. I tell my teenagers that are all the time. You're responsible for your reaction and your responses.
Yeah.
Um, I love that you talked about that because, one of the things that I did when I started doing my policies and stuff, I was just like, okay, they can like kind of they can cancel in 24 hours and da 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 da. Da. Then I went back and I said, okay, if I could dream this and do this exactly like I want to, and then I wrote it down, and then there was a happy medium because like
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like sometimes things just happen and whatever, whatever those
Hmm.
things are. So I love that you talked about that. You know what I mean? Like, because a lot of people don't think about that.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think it's similar to how we set boundaries with ourselves. So I can bring this into the personal, but
Hmm.
boundaries you don't set for other people. Boundaries you set for yourself and how
Yep.
you want to handle yourself in situations, right? So we can't micromanage or control the people around us, but we can choose how we're going to show up and engage in situations. And that's romantically, that's in
Yeah.
business,
Yeah.
it's at school, wherever, church, wherever you are in this world, right? And so your own policies and procedures are your boundaries and how you choose to follow those boundaries or not.
Isn't that so funny? You don't think about that all meshing together, but it does.
They're
It really
very
truly
similar.
does. I tell clients sometimes like I can look at your personal life and tell you where your holes are in your business life because it all
Interesting.
intertwines.
Well, and I always say that once people start working on sex, then it transfers into the rest of their life because once you learn how to negotiate for your
Hmm.
needs in such a taboo topic, you develop negotiation skills in other areas. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Sex is negotiation, and
Yeah.
it's not a win, like it's not a win-lose negotiation. Like you don't want to be in a situation where I get mine, screw you. Because this is
Yeah.
supposed to be a long-term relationship. You want to
Right.
keep having sex with this person.
Right.
But let's flip that to business. Same thing. Like if you're doing a business to business job and you want to keep a long-term collaborative relationship, you need to think about how do we create win-wins that make both parties happy because we want to do this business long term.
Hmm.
Sexy business or business. We
Right.
need to have collaborative negotiations that work for both parties where everybody feels like they're leaving with something.
Yeah, I actually talked to a company a while back about having transactional relationships with your customer or having the authentic relationships with your customers.
Hmm.
Your transactional is just, hey, you're buying this from me, great, we're moving on, but you're not a repeat customer. And, those don't always benefit you long term because it's just I'm done. I'm done. I'm checking off a box. Whereas your authentic ones are more like, hey, you're marinating and you're really working on that relationship with that
Hmm.
client so that they remain your client long term. So it's really no different than what you're talking
It
about.
isn't. You're creating loyalty, like
Hmm.
brand loyalty. Because these days, when people are buying and selling, like when somebody chooses to buy, we're looking at like who are you as a company? What are you selling as a person? Not just
Yeah.
this product, but like people will skip over this product versus this product based on like believing in the owner of the company or
Yeah.
believing in the vision of the company. Ours is
Yep.
it's interesting, but it's like based on character. Like I
Hmm.
trust the character of this company, and that's why I choose them and their
Yeah.
products.
I love that. So tell me someone who has inspired you to do what you're doing.
Oh, so many. Betty Dotson is someone who inspired me. Way back when, actually, oh gosh, Sue Johansson was this nurse lady who used to have a show back. So I graduated college in 2000. Seven? Oh, gosh. Okay, 2007. I was like, wait, when did I? Gosh, too many years have passed. So in 2007, when I was considering what grad school I wanted to go to, this lady, she was answering sex questions and she would get sex toys and she would give it burquettes, like 3 burquettes for how hot it was. And so she was an influencer there in the beginning. I was like,
Hmm.
this lady is hilarious. I could definitely do this. I want to do this job. And then Betty Dodson is somebody who's taught women how to self-pleasure. And like, so many women struggle with orgasms and learning how to give themselves orgasms. So Betty Dodson is this amazing sex educator at large in the sex therapy field who just recently passed, by the way. Our
Mm.
rest in power, Betty Dodson. But she taught women how to self-pleasure and learn how to take back their orgasm. And so her work has been so inspiring to me too.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I didn't know either one of their names, but I wrote them
Oh.
down. That's interesting. Uh, so tell me, I know you have a book. I know you're writing a book, or
Yeah,
you're,
yeah,
are
yeah.
you, did, how far have you gotten on that?
So I I have gotten through a couple chapters. So I have two books already that are written: Premarital
Okay,
Counseling, a
two.
guide for
Okay.
clinician, and Helping Couples Overcome Infidelity, a therapist manual. Both are written for both clinicians and clients. So those are available on Amazon. Anyone can check those out. Actually, I was just reading the infidelity book and I was like, wow, that is powerful. I was really proud of I haven't read it in a while, and I was just like, I'm really proud of that. I could read the forgiveness steps, like I have steps for how you forgive in there.
Mm.
But so those two books are written. The current book is about sex, and I'm thinking about breaking it down into shorter books, like because there's four sections, and I realized
Hmm.
like I think people read in smaller doses, like little mini books. So I think rather than doing a big book, I've been brainstorming on this. I'd like to do four mini books, kind of like a little series. So that
That's
is
awesome.
in process, and it will come out hopefully next year.
That's exciting. So, what are the name of your books exactly?
So the one is Helping Couples Overcome Infidelity, a
Okay.
therapist's manual, and the other one is Premarital Counseling, a guide for clinicians. People can look up my last name on Amazon and find those.
And spell the last name just because people are listening, so they might not
Yeah.
see it.
Skurtu. And also
Awesome.
you can look up my YouTube too. So like that's the other thing. I have free skills there at my YouTube channel. So look up Angela Skurtu, Skurtu. And I have over 300 videos of different relationship skills, sexual health skills, and infidelity skills, like how to walk through that in a productive way. This is with air quotes because it's painful and it's messy, but there are
Yeah.
ways to heal.
Well, we'll definitely post links for your books and your pod or your YouTube channel on when this airs. That's what I was
Thank
trying to say.
you.
Sorry.
I know what you mean.
So, if you had to give advice to someone that was going to be doing like let's talk about young people because this podcast I'm interviewing like really young entrepreneurs that are just starting in the space and then
Mhm.
also people that have been doing it for years, right? So what would be the one piece of advice that you would give a young person that is starting a business?
Um, you're in a bubble. We always are. And so break the bubble or pop it somehow. And it's actually one of the steps I took to really start this business and do well in it is I could not stay and only learn from people in my business. You have to like even as therapists. So my bubble is therapy mumbo jumbo, like all the therapy terms like self-compassion and cognitive behavioral therapy. And so you might get a degree or like this training in something and it's its own little bubble of information and it's limited. And
Mm,
so it's really important to expand or pop that bubble and learn from people outside your field because that's really how I learned to start this
mm,
business. It was by talking to multiple people and very like accountants, lawyers, doctors, I spoke with even clients coming in, like people in different like blue collar type jobs, like metal and sheet work, people who are construction workers who own businesses. Like talk to other people who own businesses because from that you will get a bigger pool of information for how to start a business. And here's the other piece. So there's probably two, two to this. There are so many paths to starting a business. So whatever you do, pick a path and do it consistently as possible. Because that's one of the things that I think people mess up is they try to shoot a bunch of bullets into the dark. Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Like
hmm.
even me, I was a little bit, of course, guilty of this in the beginning.
Sure.
Like now I've gotten to a point, like, so I do content marketing. I have YouTube, right? Like I just do YouTube well. Like really dig deep if you're going to do social media marketing into one thing and do it as well and consistently as possible. Because that's really how you grow that brand loyalty and support. Whereas if you're like, I'm going to do this podcast, I'm going to do a YouTube channel, I'm going to do networking, I'm going to do, it's like, one or two, like do one or two things well and consistently.
Yeah.
Because that's how you develop your audience and the people who are interested in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Um, as opposed to like I said, 50 million different things that you don't actually follow through with.
Yeah. I love that. I love your niche. One of the things I run into, and I was even like this my first year of business, like my niche was just so wide, kind of like what you're talking about.
Hmm.
And I just really hadn't honed it in. And, but I love that you know exactly who your clients are and who you're helping. And it's not a, well, I mean, I could really do this with anybody, but you're like very specific. And I love that.
Yeah, well, and I mean, for people listening in too, you can hone it over time, right? Like I started as more broad, trying different
Mm-hmm.
things, but then as I learned, for example, oh, these are the clients that I feel I actually, so little side business strategy. For clients that I had a lot of passion and joy with after I worked with them, I'd put a star on their file. So I call them gold star clients. And the reason I
Mm,
did this was to really hone in on my ideal client. Who are the people that I love working with and I get the most like passion and energy from working with them. So I started out broad and then now I have like condensed it to these are my people. These are the people I
yeah.
do well. And so now when I market to those ideal clients. And so it's a way to kind of figure it out because nobody has it all figured out at once. Like I said,
No,
even as I'm saying, be consistent and be specific. Well, you start broad and you try things and then you kind of fall into what you like over time. Like that's the reality of business.
I don't know if you're listening. She just gave you a brilliant nugget. And I'm going to repeat it just because it really was brilliant. The clients that you're working with, whether you're a service based or tradesperson or whatever you do for your business, put a gold star next to the ones that you really enjoy working with. I loved that. I've never heard anybody say that before, and that is a great way to really hone that in because I've always thought like I knew what I wanted just because I know what I want. Um, you know, but not everybody does, and so they broaden themselves so much that they take so much time being broad and they aren't able to build the business they want to have. And so
Mhm.
I love that was brilliant. That's a brilliant nugget.
Well, that's how I got out of compassion fatigue in 2020. I might have left this field had I not done that, to be
Mm,
frank.
that's great. You should trademark that.
Your gold star clients. Find your
Hey,
gold star clients.
it's a great it might be a great article or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry. I know.
I'll put
You're
it on
just
one of my
like,
YouTube videos. I
there you
appreciate it.
go. That's great. Okay, well, I mean, that's about all I have. Is there anything else that you feel like I want to leave it with this?
Um, Yeah, I don't know. There's so many things. You know, the one thing so I'm writing my book about sex, and one of the things I'm trying to teach people is that, everybody says sex is complicated. Sex is complicated, and it's not actually complicated. Sex is playing around, exploring different body parts to find out what sensations feel good. Like that's actually what sex is tinkering around. But it is your relationship with sex that's complicated. And so part of having a healthy sex life or having a healthy relationship with sex is developing a more neutral, natural, healthy relationship with sex. Once you do that, then the actual tinkering around and trying different things actually is pretty simple. It just
Mhm.
requires a lot of direct communication to say, oh, I like that a little better than this. Or,
Yeah,
that's not that great for me. But it's all that baggage that we bring that's what's really getting in the way. And so, I mean, that's my job, right? Helping
yeah,
people figure out how to change their relationship with sex so that they can have good sex again or for the first time.
yeah. I love that. And just me recapping like things that you said throughout it. Like also, like again, I'm going to go back to like if you are struggling in your relationship with your partner or your husband or whatever you have, like don't be afraid to reach out and get the help that you guys might need. And
Hmm.
sex may not be the issue at all. You talked about it could be all the other factors within the relationship might be what's causing what you deem not having a healthy sex life. Um, so yeah, reach out to Angela. Angela, how do they get a hold of you?
A couple ways. You can go to my website at therapistInSt. Louis.com and submit a contact form. Or if you want to check out my YouTube videos, some people need to binge watch me before they're ready to buy, and that's fine. So binge watch my YouTube videos at Angela Skurtu. That's Skurtu. I'm always giving out free tips and content to just help people live better lives.
Well, thank you so much for being on here. This has been fun for me. I just enjoy interviewing people in general, but it's always fun when it gets a little spicy. For some people would call this spicy. So, well, thank you so much again, Angela, and looking forward to seeing you again sometime, I'm sure.
Yeah, we will. Thank you for having me.